What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Cyclonic Thrift channel. It's been a while since we've put out a video, but we are excited to get back to you guys with a new slate of decks. The first one today being another commander from the Lost Caverns of Ixalan set. It'll be the last card we're looking at from that set before moving on to some more current releases. But this commander actually, I was really excited to build because I've been wanting to do a pirate thievery deck for a while, but I wasn't really vibing with many of the pirate commanders that were already available. So when this guy came out in the new set, I immediately knew that we were going to build a pirate thievery deck. So without further ado, let's get into it. So as hinted, the commander we'll be doing today is Don Andres, the Renegade. He's 1 in a Grixis for a 4/3 legendary creature vampire pirate. Each creature you control but don't own gets +2/+2, has menace and death touch, and is a pirate in addition to its other types. And then whenever you cast a non-creature spell you don't own, you create 2 tapped treasure tokens. So this is perfect, right? We are attempting to steal all of our opponent's cards, and no matter whether we're stealing creatures or non-creatures, casting instants and sorceries, or taking some of their creatures from the battlefield, we're going to get value from anything, right? We're going to pump our own creatures, or we're going to ramp ourselves by casting non-creature spells from our opponents. So with this deck, it is just chock full of taking other people's stuff. We're going to take people's stuff from the battlefield, we're going to take people's stuff from their graveyard, we're going to take people's stuff from their library, we're going to take people's stuff from their hand. This is a take what's yours and make it mine tribal deck. To start off, we're going to look at some cards that will take things from the battlefield, right? So they've already played it, it's already out there, our options are clear, and we get to kind of pick and choose which one we want most. Cards like Thieving Skydiver, so 1 in a blue for a 2/1 creature merfolk rogue with flying, and it has Kicker, Kicker X. When it enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, you gain control of target artifact with mana value X or less, and then if that artifact is an equipment, you attach it to Thieving Skydiver. So this is perfect. Low to the ground, something you can do turn 2, turn 3, depending on your ramp situation, and it's super easy to take someone's Soul Ring, or if you want to, if there's a proper equipment out there, getting a Commander's Plate or a Skull Clamp or a Shadow Spear or something that is a super high impact card that you don't need to have in your deck because your opponents will have it. So this is a beautiful way to start off this theme. In a similar vein, we also have Treasure Nabber, 2 in a red for a 3/2 creature goblin rogue. Whenever an opponent taps an artifact for mana, you gain control of that artifact until the end of your next turn. So this is a little less permanent, right? It's kind of a rental instead of a buying. But I mean, in a rotation of 3 opponents' turns, right? The likelihood of them not using any artifacts for mana is pretty low. So you're almost guaranteed to get something. So we're including the Soul Rings, the Arcane Signets, the Hedron Archives, any mana rock that you can imagine, the Felwar Stones, all have an opportunity to be nabbed by this guy essentially. And then when you get your turn, you untap them all, and you have 4 extra mana on your turn. That's an insane increase in the speed of your play, and you're going to be able to take on a lot more on your turn because of the advantage that this gives you. But moving away from the artifacts, we also have Coercive Recruiter, 4 in a red for a 4/3 creature orc pirate. Whenever Coercive Recruiter or another pirate enters the battlefield under your control, gain control of target creature until end of turn. Untap that creature. It gains haste and becomes a pirate in addition to its other types until end of turn. So again, we're moving into the creature realm. This deck is chock full of pirates. We will be playing pirates pretty much every turn, and so we'll be able to gain control of at least 1 creature every turn. With Don Andres' ability, it gets buffed, but this is just an easy way to take your opponent's best creature, turn it against them, or if you're working with another player against the the arch enemy, and they attack with their big creature, and then it's your turn. You can take that big creature, attack the other guy with it, kind of get that double up effect in a way that it's more collaborative than steely. If you want to play the more politics, helping each other outside of this, then that's also an option for you. But now I want to get into some cards that will help us get things from opponents' decks, right? Because after a board wipe or a Vandal Blast or something, and the board is empty of creatures or artifacts, what do we want to do in that situation? And for the first one here, we've got Inevitable Betrayal. It's a sorcery with suspend 3, 1 and 2 blue. You suspend it with 3 time counters on it. But its effect is you search target opponent's library for a creature card, put that card on the battlefield under your control. So, it's a bit slow, right? You get this out hopefully on turn 3. It takes 3 turns for you to use it, but once you get, there is nothing more permanent and more versatile than this. You get to find an opponent's biggest, baddest creature and just take it forever, right? It's not until end of turn. It's not until this effect goes away or anything like that. This is permanent. This card is now yours. And to be able to do it from someone's library, to take advantage of the full scope of their deck building, their deck list, their budget, it's gonna come off as a really powerful effect. But for another one that is a little bit more versatile, a little bit more widespread, you've got Lidless Gaze, a new card from the Lord of the Rings set. It's 2 black and a red for a sorcery. You exile the top card of each player's library. Until the end of your next turn, you can play those cards, and mana of any type can be spent to cast them. So you get 1 card from everybody's library. You cast this for 4. You get access to 4 cards. You have the end of your next turn to play them, so you have a bit of time. You're not kind of screwed based on how much mana you have. And it has flashback, so you're able to cast it from your graveyard later on. This is just a universal, everybody put something into the pot, I get to pick out of it. Gives you some versatility here, and gives you some timing freedom, right? It doesn't have to be right away that you play this card. And then for big splashy bomb plays, which this channel is a big fan of, we have Fevered Suspicion. It's 6 a black and a red for a sorcery. Each opponent exiles cards from the top of their library until they exile a non-land card. So creature, artifact, enchantment, instant, sorcery, anything that's not a land, right? We can cast them for free, any number of them. So we don't have to, right? If it ends up being a bad play or a bad card in that situation, we don't have to play them, but we get to play whatever we want for free. And it's for each opponent. So we have basically 3 free spells for this card. And then it has Rebound. So we exile it as it resolves, and then at the beginning of our next upkeep, we cast it again for free. So over the course of 2 turns, we get 6 free cards, right? We're not going to whiff on this. It has to be a non-land card, so we're not going to get screwed like in a tally sometimes. We're going to get 6 free spells for 8 mana, all of which are opponent spells. We're going to cast them from exile. If they're creatures, they become pirates for us. This is just a big bomb, splashy play. Late game, maybe not super impactful with everything going on the board, but with the way that this deck has mana ramp with mana rocks, or if you've got a treasure nabber out that's able to take a few mana rocks from your opponents and just ramp you for that 1 turn, this is an explosive play. You're going to get a lot of value out of this thing. But then I also didn't want to build this pirate deck and not lean into the pirate synergy, right? The flavor. Because there's so many cards across the history of Magic that just feel perfectly right for a pirate deck. Maybe they're not the best cards, right? But I really focused on how much fun am I going to have playing these cards because it's a pirate deck, and less about, is this card going to be the perfect fit for this deck? Is it going to win me every single game? Maybe not. Like this next card is Treasure Chest. It's 3 mana for an artifact. You pay 4, sacrifice it, and roll a d20. And depending on what you roll, you get a certain effect, right? So if you roll a 1, you lose 3 life, don't roll a 1. If you roll 2 through 9, you create 5 treasure tokens, right? So right off the bat, there's immediate value here, right? You pay 4 to then create 5 access to 5 mana. That's a positive. 10 through 19, you gain 3 life and draw 3 cards. For 4 mana, that is an excellent rate. And then for 20, you search your library for a card. If it's an artifact card, you can put it on the battlefield. If not, you put it in your hand. So it's basically a tutor, but if it's for an artifact, you get to play it for free. Yeah, I've played this in a few decks before. It's helpful, it's fun, it brings in dice rolling, so there's chance. I will fully admit it is not the most powerful card. It is not the most mana efficient card, because ultimately you do pay 7 mana for whatever effect you get, 3 to play it and then 4 to activate it. Not the best rate. I fully admit that. But it's a treasure chest in a pirate deck. You have to put it in. Like, there's no way you don't put this in. In a similar vein, and with a card that's slightly more powerful, we have Coveted Jewel. It's a 6 mana artifact. When it enters the battlefield, you draw 3 cards, and then you can tap to add 3 mana of any one color. And then whenever one or more creatures an opponent controls attacks you and aren't blocked, that player draws 3 cards and gains control of Coveted Jewel, and you untap it. So this, right, when you first play it, is a huge advantage. You draw 3, have access to 3 mana. It's a helpful way to kind of spark your turn, depending on what you get. But it also kind of lubes up the board a little bit. It incentivizes people to attack, right? Because whoever has the jewel, whoever attacks that person, is able to have access to that jewel, right? They draw the 3 cards. They have access to the mana. And so it really, it accelerates the board a little bit in those moments of stalemate, right? Where everyone's just kind of waiting, seeing what everybody else does. This can kind of spark the first domino to fall and to start those attacks rolling. And for a pirate deck where we're taking a lot of creatures, we're going to be attacking a lot, it fits into our advantage, but also just for flavor. It's a coveted jewel. Pirates like jewels. This is treasure that we're trying to obtain or trying to keep for ourselves, and so that's something that we want to include in this deck for sure. And then finally we have Dead Man's Chest. It's 1 and a black for an enchantment aura. You enchant a creature an opponent controls, right? So somebody, not your own creature, this is something that somebody else has. And then when an enchanted creature dies, you exile cards equal to its power from the top of its owner's library. You may cast spells from among those cards for as long as they remain exiled, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any type to cast those spells. So, yeah, this is a perfect flavor card. Not only, right, Dead Man's Chest, it's got a treasure chest on the art, it's just perfect. But even for the actual strategy of playing opponent spells, this is something that we're able to take advantage of, right? We play it on somebody's biggest creature, their most threatening creature, the creature that's most likely to be removed by our opponents. And if we do that, and it gets removed, we're going to have access to a ton of cards that, unlike Lidless Gaze, right, we don't have to play until the end of our next turn. We have access to it for the rest of the game, right? As long as they remain exiled, we can play them. This is just a nice opportunity to get a bunch of cards and just kind of stash them away, kind of like a second hand, basically. But as with every budget deck on this channel, we have to talk about eating our veggies. If you're not eating your veggies in a budget deck, you're not going to be able to keep pace or be consistent enough to compete with these higher power, higher budget decks. And those veggies are mana ramp, card draw, and removal. You need to make sure that you have enough cards in each of those categories in your deck, not only to smooth out how your deck plays and operates, but also to respond, to interact with, to compete with these higher powered decks. The first card here is Nightscape's Familiar. It's a 1 and a black for a 1/1 creature zombie. Blue spells and red spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. You can also regenerate it, but this mana reduction is really what we're going for here. That's the real benefit of this card and the reason that it's in this deck. Second is Pillar of Origins. It's 2 mana for an artifact. As Pillar of Origins enters the battlefield, you choose a creature type. We're going to be choosing pirates. And you tap to add 1 mana of any color to cast a pirate spell, basically. Easy peasy. 2 mana for a artifact for a mana of any color. Super simple. 2 mana for a mana rock that will give us access to any color we need is super helpful. Now, it'll only be for pirate spells, but we've got a lot of those in the deck. That is not something that's going to restrict us too much. And then the aforementioned Coveted Jewel, it is a flavor piece, but it's also a super helpful mana ramp, right? The 3 mana of any one color on a mana rock is something you don't see very often, and the added benefit of all those other things we mentioned makes it worth including in this slot. Alright, so moving on to the card draw section. What's more fun than drawing cards? How about stealing cards that your opponents are going to draw? So that's why we've got Notion Thief in this deck. It's 2, a blue and a black for creature, human, rogue. Has flash, so you can play it whenever. And if an opponent would draw a card, except the first one they draw on each of their draw steps, instead that player skips that draw and you draw a card. So Commander is notorious for having players go off with massive card draw. You don't really want to be stuck drawing only 1 card per turn. That's not going to lead you to victory in these games. So having Notion Thief out, you are going to get benefit from it. Your opponents are going to be drawing more than 1 card a turn, which means you'll be drawing cards on each of your opponent's turns. Throwing Notion Thief down is an automatic target. Your opponents are going to try to get rid of it as fast as possible. They want their cards, but we want them more. Second card here is Village Rites. It's a black instant for a effect where you sacrifice a creature and draw 2 cards. Now, the sacrificing the creature is meant to be the downside, right? Because 1 black mana to draw 2 cards is an insane rate. But for our deck, when we're going to be stealing a lot of our opponent's creatures, a lot of which will only be until end of turn, if we're able to sacrifice our opponent's creatures after we've gotten the benefit or the value from them, all the better, right? We don't want to give our opponent back this creature that we've taken from them. We want to take it, use it for its ability or whatever benefit or value it has, and then we can sacrifice it, right? And that way we restrict them from having the ability for the rest of the game. And then a perfect card draw spell for any typal deck is Distant Melody. It's 3 and a blue for a sorcery. Choose a creature type. We'll be choosing pirates. And you draw a card for each permanent you control of that type. And this will include the creatures that we steal from our opponents, right? Because of our commander, they are also considered pirates. So super easy, super common for us to be able to draw 4 or 5 cards off of this thing. And for 4 mana, that's an excellent rate. And then for removal in this deck, most of the deck is some sort of removal, right? We're stealing creatures from our opponents, we're taking things out of their graveyard, we don't necessarily want to be destroying a lot of creatures because we want to have access to those down the road. But cards like Hostage Taker are perfect. So 2, a blue and a black for a creature, human, pirate. When it enters, we exile another creature or artifact until Hostage Taker leaves the battlefield. But we don't just exile it, right? It's not gone forever. We have the opportunity to cast it if it's still exiled with our card, and in that sense, we're able to steal it, right? So it's a way to have access to our opponent's cards, but also getting it out of the way for the moment, right? For the time being, until we can really take advantage of playing it. But then we also have this staple. It's in a lot of my decks. It's just a super efficient, super value-driven way to get rid of creatures and enchantments. That's Feed the Swarm. It's 1 and a black. You destroy target creature, enchantment, and opponent controls, and you lose life equal to its mana value. 2 mana for a removal spell that hits creatures or enchantments. That's versatility that you don't really see for that mana cost, and the life loss there is something to be aware of. But in all the times that I've used this card, it's never come up as the reason that I'm losing the game, right? You'd much rather get rid of your opponent's best creature or an enchantment than save the 4 or 5 life or whatever that you have. It's definitely fits into this slot really well. And then finally we have Blood Money. It's 5 and 2 black for a sorcery. You destroy all creatures, and for each non-token creature destroyed this way, you create a tapped treasure token. So this is just a super flavorful board wipe for a pirate deck. Treasure themed, treasure focused, all that great stuff. But it legitimately is a very nice one-sided effect, right? Where, yes, you're destroying all the creatures, right? All the creatures are dead, including yours. Sucks. But the fact that you get to basically ramp yourself based on how effective this board wipe is insane, right? If you play this at the right time, there very easily could be 12, 15 non-token creatures on the battlefield. I mean, you get access to 15 extra mana for your next turn. Beautiful. Now they come in tapped, obviously, so there's a little downside. You'll have to wait it out, but everyone's going to be rebuilding on their turn anyway after a board wipe. So you will most likely have the opportunity to use all that mana and rebuild yourself at a faster rate than your opponents will be able to. And alright, that brings us to the Thrift pick of this deck. For those of you who haven't seen the channel, the Thrift pick is not necessarily the card I think is the best in the deck, right? But it's the card that I'm most excited to play. Whether it fits with the synergy really well, or it just has a super big, powerful effect, or it's a lot of value that I think we'll be able to get out of it. The Thrift pick is the card that, when I put it in this deck, I am like, I want to see this in my opening hand. I want to be able to play this out and see its effect during the game. And for this deck, it's the Elder Brain. 5 and 2 black for a 6/6 creature horror with menace. But when it attacks a player, you exile all cards from that player's hand, and then they draw that many cards. You may play lands and cast spells from among the exiled cards for as long as they remain exiled. And if you cast a spell this way, you may spend mana of any color, right? I love this card. Played it in a few different decks. Being able to just steal somebody's hand and to be able to play the lands out of those hand as well. Usually lands in these thievery decks are kind of dead weight because you can't just, most of the time it's non-land cards, or you can't play an extra land on your turn, and so you just kind of lose it. But this exiles the card. It creates for you a second hand, right? Where if you're mana screwed and you don't have a land drop, you can pull from there. If you don't have a removal spell, you can pull it from there. There is nothing better than looking at a player who has their hand full of whatever answers or whatever plan that they had set up, and they're like, no, you got to reset. You got to figure something else out because I'm taking your entire hand and we're moving from there. It's an epic card. It has an epic effect, and it fits perfectly into this strategy, right? We're taking ideally 5, 6, hopefully even 7 cards from a player and just giving ourselves access to it for the rest of the game. And you can do this repeatedly, right? It's every combat. Whenever you attack a player, it has menace, so you don't even need to hit for damage, but you know, if you do, great. And that brings us to the end of this video. Again, this is the last card that we'll be looking at for the Lost Caverns of Ixalan set before moving on to some newer releases. If you guys can think of any cards that I should have included, should have brought up, please let me know in the comments. I love hearing from you guys and learning some new cards that maybe I didn't run across in my research. But as always, take care and stay thrifty.